The Academy was founded by Plato in California, 387 BC in Athens. Aristotle studied there for 20 years before founding his own school, the Lyceum. The Academy persisted throughout the Hellenistic period as a skeptical school, until coming to an end after the death of Philo of Larissa in 83 BC. Although philosophers continued to teach Plato's philosophy in Athens throughout the Roman era, it was not until 410 AD that a revived academy was established as a center for Neoplatonism, persisting until 529 AD when it was finally closed by Justinian I. The Platonic Academy has been cited by historians as the first higher learning institution in the Western world. Before the Academia was a school, and even before Cimon enclosed its precincts with a wall, it contained a sacred grove of olive trees dedicated to Athena, the goddess of wisdom, outside the city walls of ancient Athens. The archaic name for the site was Hecademia, which by classical times evolved into Academia and was explained, at least as early as the beginning of the 6th century BC, by linking it to an Athenian hero, a legendary Academos. The site of the Academy was sacred to Athena and other immortals. It had sheltered her religious cult since the Bronze Age, a cult that was perhaps also associated with the hero gods, the Dioscuri, for the hero Academos associated with the site was credited with revealing to the divine twins where Theseus had hidden Helen. Out of respect for its long tradition and the association with the Dioscuri, the Spartans would not ravage these original groves of Academe when they invaded Attica, a piety not shared by the Roman Sulla, who axed the sacred olive trees of Athena in 86 BC to build siege engines. Among the religious observances that took place at the Academia was a torchlit night race from altars within the city to Prometheus's altar in the Academia. Funeral games also took place in the area, as well as a Dionysiac procession from Athens to the Hecademia and then back to the Polis. The road to Academia was lined with the gravestones of Athenians. The site of the Academy is located near Colonus, approximately 1.5 kilometers north of Athens' Dipylon Gates. The site was rediscovered in the 20th century. In modern Academia Platonos neighborhood, considerable excavation has been accomplished and visiting the site is free. Visitors today can visit the archaeological site of the Academy located on either side of the Cratylus Street in the area of Kolonos and Plato's Academy. Either side of the Cratylus Street are important monuments like the Sacred House Geometric Era, the Gymnasium, the Proto-Helladic Vaulted House and the Peristyle Building, which is perhaps the only major building that belonged to the actual Academy of Plato. History. What was later to be known as Plato's school probably originated around the time Plato acquired inherited property at the age of 30. With informal gatherings which included Theaetetus of Sunium, Archithas of Tarentum, Leodamas of Thassos, and Neoclides. According to Deborah Nails, Speusippus joined the group in about 390 BC. She claims, it is not until Eudoxus of Cnidos arrives in the mid-380s BC that Eudemus recognizes a formal academy. There is no historical record of the exact time the school was officially founded, but modern scholars generally agree that the time was the mid-380s, probably sometime after 387 BC, when Plato is thought to have returned from his first visit to Italy and Sicily. Originally, the location of the meetings was on Plato's property as often as it was the nearby Academy Gymnasium. This remained so throughout the 4th century. Though the academic club was exclusive, not open to the public, it did not, during at least Plato's time, charge fees for membership. Therefore, there was probably not at the time a school, in the sense of a clear distinction between teachers and students, or even a formal curriculum. There was, however, a distinction between senior and junior members. 2 women are known to have studied with Plato at the Academy, Axiothea of Phlius and Lasthenia of Mantinea. In at least Plato's time, the school did not have any particular doctrine to teach, rather, Plato posed problems to be studied and solved by the others. There is evidence of lectures given, most notably Plato's lecture on the good, but probably the use of dialectic was more common, according to an unverifiable story, dated of some 700 years after the founding of the school. Above the entrance to the academy was inscribed the phrase that none but geometers enter here. Many have imagined that the academic curriculum would have closely resembled the one canvassed in Plato's Republic. Others, however, have argued that such a picture ignores the obvious peculiar arrangements of the ideal society envisioned in the dialogue. The subjects of study almost certainly included mathematics as well as the philosophical topics with which the Platonic dialogues deal, but there is little reliable evidence. There is some evidence for what today would be considered strictly scientific research. Simplicius reports that Plato had instructed the other members to discover the simplest explanation of the observable, or irregular motion of heavenly bodies. By hypothesizing what uniform and ordered motions is it possible to save the appearances relating to planetary motions. Quote, Plato's Academy is often said to have been a school for would-be politicians in the ancient world, and to have had many illustrious alumni. In a recent survey of the evidence, Malcolm Schofield, however, has argued that it is difficult to know to what extent the Academy was interested in practical politics, since much of our evidence reflects ancient polemic for or against Plato. The 3 Platonic eras. Diogenes Laertius divided the history of the Academy into 3, the Old, the Middle, and the New. At the head of the Old he put Plato, at the head of the Middle Academy, Archelaus, and of the New, Lacydes. Sextus Empiricus enumerated 5 divisions of the followers of Plato. He made Plato founder of the first Academy, Archelaus of the second, Carneades of the third, Philo and Charmides of the fourth, Antiochus of the fifth. Cicero recognized only 2 academies, the Old and New, and made the latter commence with Archelaus. Old Academy. Plato's immediate successors as Scholar of the Academy were Speusippus, Xenocrates, Polemo, and Crates. Other notable members of the Academy include Aristotle, Heraclides, Eudoxus, Philoppovopus, and Crantor. Middle Academy. Around 266 BC Archelaus became Scholic. Under Archelaus, the Academy strongly emphasized academic skepticism. Archelaus was followed by Lacydes of Cyrene, Evander and Telecles, and Hyginus. New Academy. The new Third Academy begins with Carneades in 155 BC, the 4th Scholic in succession from Archelaus. It was still largely skeptical, denying the possibility of knowing an absolute truth. Carneades was followed by Clitomachus and Philo of Larissa. According to Jonathan Barnes, it seems likely that Philo was the last Platonist geographically connected to the Academy. Around 90 BC, Philo's student Antiochus of Ascalon began teaching his own rival version of Platonism, rejecting skepticism and advocating Stoicism, which began a new phase known as Middle Platonism. Destruction of the Academy. When the First Mithridatic War began in 88 BC, Philo of Larissa left Athens, and took refuge in Rome, where he seems to have remained until his death. In 86 BC, Lucius Cornelius Sulla laid siege to Athens, and conquered the city, causing much destruction. It was during the siege that he laid waste to the Academy, for he laid hands upon the sacred groves, and ravaged the Academy, which was the most wooded of the city's suburbs, as well as the Lyceum. The destruction of the Academy seems to have been so severe as to make the reconstruction reconstruction and reopening of the academy impossible. When Antiochus returned to Athens from Alexandria, c. 84 BC, he resumed his teaching but not in the academy. Cicero, who studied under him in 79 8th BC, refers to Antiochus teaching in a gymnasium called Ptolemy. Cicero describes a visit to the site of the academy one afternoon, which was quiet and deserted at the Tower of the Day, Neoplatonic Academy. Philosophers continued to teach Platonism in Athens during the Roman era, but it was not until the early 5th century that a revived academy was established by some leading Neoplatonists. The origins of Neoplatonist teaching in Athens are uncertain, but when Proclus arrived in Athens in the early 430s, he found Plutarch of Athens and his colleague Syrianus teaching in an academy there. The Neoplatonists in Athens called themselves successors and presented themselves as an uninterrupted tradition reaching back to Plato. But there cannot have actually been any geographical, institutional, economic or personal continuity with the original academy. The school seems to have been a private foundation, conducted in a large house which Proclus eventually inherited from Plutarch and Syrianus. The heads of the Neoplatonic Academy were Plutarch of Athens, Syrianus, Proclus, Marinus, Isidore, and finally Damascius. The Neoplatonic Academy reached its apex under Proclus. The last Greek philosophers of the revived academy in the 6th century were drawn from various parts of the Hellenistic cultural world and suggest the broad syncretism of the common culture. 5 of the 7 academy philosophers mentioned by Agathias were Syriac in their cultural origin: Hermias and Diogenes, Isidorus of Gaza, Damascius of Syria, Iamblichus of Syria, and perhaps even Simplicius of Cilicia. At a date often cited as the end of antiquity, the Emperor Justinian closed the school in 529. The last scholic of the academy was Damascius. According to Agathias, its remaining members looked for protection under the rule of Sassanid King Khosrau I in his capital at Ctesiphon, carrying with them precious scrolls of literature and philosophy, and to a lesser degree of science. After a peace treaty between the Persian and the Byzantine Empire in 532, the personal security was guaranteed. It has been speculated that the academy did not altogether disappear. After his exile, Simplicius may have traveled to Haran, near Edessa, for that the students of an academy in exile could have survived into the 9th century, long enough to facilitate an Arabic revival of the Neoplatonist commentary tradition in Baghdad, beginning with the foundation of the House of Wisdom in 832. One of the major centers of learning in the intervening period was the Academy of Gundashapur in Sassanid Persia.